Hello and welcome to Africa News. I'm Dilek. Here are the top stories making headlines today. The World Health Organization says there's still a chance to contain the Ebola outbreak despite the virus spreading to a sixth province in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Zambia's President Hakainde Hichilema has secured a second term after winning the presidential election with around 60% of the vote. And in Tanzania, businesses can now settle payments directly with companies in China in Chinese yuan without having to use a third currency. The World Health Organization says it can still contain the second deadliest Ebola outbreak on record, despite the virus spreading to a sixth province in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The disease has killed at least 2,325 people. World Health Organization officials warn that stopping the spread requires more funding. The agency has currently raised just 60% of its financial target.
Together, the contributions have reached $69.3 million of the $115 million currently required for WHO's life-saving operations, a critical pillar of the broader response, led with governments, communities and partners, including Africa's CDC. As countries strengthen coordinated cross-border actions, we call for the rapid disbursement of pledged funds and additional flexible financing to help stop transmission, save lives, and protect regional and global health security.
Decades of armed conflict have taken a heavy toll on investment in the Democratic Republic of Congo, but a new World Bank survey suggests the biggest obstacles facing businesses today are more basic: access to affordable finance and reliable electricity.
The sound of generators is a familiar business feature in Kinshasa, where companies often turn to diesel power when the grid falls. Electricity remains out of reach for much of the country. The World Bank says only 1 in 5 Congolese had access to electricity in 2024. The bank's latest enterprise survey, covering businesses across 12 regions, identifies unreliable electricity and limited access to finance among the main constraints. Compounding this, for many entrepreneurs, the lack of affordable credit makes it difficult to invest, expand, or even sustain their operations.
L'accès au crédit. I chose to start my own business, but in our country, it is very difficult. The primary issue, as is often the case, is access to credit.
Dans notre pays, c'est difficile.
Despite the ongoing conflict in eastern DRC, political instability ranked among the lowest concerns cited by businesses in the survey.
The first difficulty for investment here, regardless of everything else, is access to energy and access to credit. When you look at Congolese companies that operate here, about 77% of them report experiencing power cuts. That means you cannot operate industries without a reliable supply of energy.
The DRC has great hydropower potential, including at the Inga Falls in the country's west. But development has been held back by years of political and institutional challenges. The government is now backing measures aimed at making financing more accessible to small and medium-sized businesses.
The average interest rate is around 17%. It goes up to 20%. But good thing, for small and medium enterprises, the government has put up a body called FOGEC, which is actually made to cut the risk of these small and medium enterprises. Being with this leverage, they've negotiated 4 to 5% interest rate, which means if now we start generating big projects, this can cover the risk to the banks, and then access to money could be cheaper.
Cheaper credit could help businesses invest and expand, but without dependable power and other basic infrastructure, the DRC risks struggling to turn its vast mineral and energy potential into broader private sector growth.
Nigerian cocoa farmers are working to comply with the European Union's new anti-deforestation rules. The requirements include mapping farms and tracing the origins of cocoa products. Exporters say the new system is creating additional financial pressure for both farmers and companies.
Ojo Ayaninuola is a small-scale cocoa farmer in Akure, southwestern Nigeria. He was initially reluctant to allow his farm to be mapped because of the European Union's new anti-deforestation rules. But Sunbeth Global, one of the country's major cocoa exporters, warned him that he could lose access to the EU market if he failed to comply with the rules. The EU buys around 60% of the world's cocoa. Ayaninuola eventually agreed. The farmer says he inherited the land from his father. Sunbeth explained the rules he must follow on his farm. Farmers have been told not to cut down trees or employ children. The EU's new rules aim to prevent deforestation. Under the rules, importers must prove that their products were not grown on land where forests have been cleared. They must also identify exactly where the products were grown. The EU Deforestation Regulation, or EUDR, has been delayed twice. The new rules also require importers to prove that products were produced in line with the laws of their country of origin. Experts say many farmers in Nigeria may struggle to meet the EU requirements once the rules come into force. Nigeria has around 300,000 cocoa farmers, most of them small-scale producers. Cocoa buyers say complying with the new rules is expensive. The problem is particularly serious in Nigeria, Ivory Coast and Ghana, where hundreds of thousands of small-scale farmers live in remote rural areas. Exporters must map all farms. They must also check how the land is being used. In addition, they need to create digital systems to trace the origin of the cocoa.
It's expensive, $30, $70 per metric ton. Who's going to bear the cost? The off-takers, current conversations, off-takers are telling us that, oh, it's part of your is expected. I'm saying, no, this is an additional compliance, right? So as Europe is thinking about all of these regulations, they need to think about the cost implications, right? Because the cost-benefit analysis right now is dipping into our margins.
Nigeria's major cocoa exporters say the process is very costly. EU buyers, however, are not yet willing to cover the additional costs. The company has spent the past 3 years training farmers to comply with Nigerian laws. Hundreds of staff have been involved in the programme. The training also covers the bans on child and forced labour.
Zambia's President Hakainde Hichilema has secured a second term after winning the presidential election with around 60% of the vote. The result comes after a campaign marked by opposition allegations of fraud and concerns over political conditions.
There were celebrations from supporters of Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema in the streets of the capital Lusaka in the early hours of Tuesday after he was re-elected for a second term. Results released by the country's election commission showed that Hakainde Hichilema received roughly 60% of valid votes, compared with 38% for his main challenger Brian Mundubile. It was Hichilema's 7th run for the presidency, and he was widely expected to win due to the advantages of incumbency, while it was Mundubile's first bid to become head of state. Hichilema's campaign focused on economic reforms. Speaking before securing his second term, he acknowledged that many Zambians continued to face hardship due to the high cost of living.
We have done many things, yes, but there's a lot of more work to be done. Are we together? Life is still challenging. Life is still challenging for a lot of our people. A lot of our families still need a support that is beyond what we are delivering today.
However, the vote was marked by controversy, with opposition parties alleging fraud and accusing the government of restricting political space ahead of the vote. The counting was temporarily suspended nationwide after attacks on election officials and the theft of marked ballot papers. International and domestic observers said the conditions contributed to an uneven playing field. Authorities arrested nearly a dozen people on the night of the election, including senior opposition figures, during a raid involving an exchange of gunfire. The government said those detained were linked to militia or insurgent activity, allegations rejected by opposition.
Businesses in Tanzania can now settle payments to firms in China directly in Chinese yuan, without having to go through a third currency, often the US dollar. The country now has access to China's cross-border interbank payment system, or CIPs.
A new payment option is opening another channel for trade between Tanzania and China. China's cross-border payment system, also known as CIPS, allows banks to settle transactions directly in yuan, reducing reliance on other currencies. For Chinese businessman Wang Xing, who has lived in Tanzania for 6 years, the move could ease some challenges faced by importers.
The biggest challenge we're facing in the financial market right now is the foreign exchange in Tanzania. Because of the intervention of the US dollar, the cost of exchanging the RMB is relatively high, and there is often a shortage of foreign exchange in the market. So we hope that the bank can give us more support.
Facilitating the transactions in Tanzania is Stanbic Bank, which has also expanded access to CIPS to other African markets. For Tanzanian officials, they see greater use of the yuan as another way to support growing economic ties with China.
We confidently are foreseeing that our economic exchange will experience a significant upward trajectory, particularly now that China has fully implemented its landmark 100% zero tariff treatment policy for Tanzania, effective 1st of May 2026.
The central bank, Tanzania's financial regulator, says in addition to supporting CIPS, it is working to strengthen other regional and continental payment systems. But it says the expansion of digital cross-border payments must go hand in hand with stronger safeguards.
As these services expand, attention must remain focused on anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing controls, cybersecurity resilience, consumer protection, and prudent risk management.
The introduction of CIPS comes as trade between Tanzania and China continues to grow, with bilateral trade reaching more than $11 billion last year, a 27% increase from the previous year. China remains a major source of Tanzanian imports, including machinery, electronics, construction equipment, and other industrial goods.
And that's all we have today on Africa News. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to A News for more stories shaping Africa and the world.